Hey guys, so before I get into this video, I want you to understand where I'm coming from on the Nancy Moyer case. Right now, it is Thursday, July 11th, and in about a few hours, there's going to be an official press release done by the police department out in Washington because a tip has been filed, somebody has been arrested, and there is talk that somebody has actually confessed. So things in this video might be updated, and if they are, you will definitely see that in the final edit. If not, they're gonna be put in the description down below because, as I said, this is a breaking story. This is coming out now, and hopefully we see that this is no longer a cold case and that it's actually been solved. So I'm going to include some footage in this video of the CrimeCon event I went to last month, where the cast and the group of the Hide and Seek podcast were there.
James Basinger. I am the host of the Hide and Seek podcast.
Dr. Maurice Dotman. I've been in law enforcement for about 4 years and been doing work in missing person cases and cold cases for 20 years.
I'm Moyer. I'm Moyer's daughter. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I am William Moyer. I was actually married to Nancy for over 10 years. We were together a total of about 15 years, and we're here with the defense.
I'm Detective Mickey Hamilton with the Thurston County Sheriff's Office.
Before we get into some of those updates that will be later in the video, I want to tell you a little bit about the background and the disappearance of Nancy Moyer. Throughout all of Nancy Moyer's life, she was considered really outgoing, fun to be around, and generally an awesome person. She attended the Central Washington University and majored in accounting there, and it's where she met her future husband, Bill Moyer. They were together at a summer internship there and really just hit it off. After Nancy and Bill graduated, they started their life together. They got married, and Nancy got a great job as a fiscal analyst at the Department of Ecology. She had a booming social life, and all of her coworkers adored her, and a year after that, she got pregnant with her first daughter, Sam. Sam was only 9 years old at the time that her mother disappeared. That was back in 2009, which makes Sam about 19 or 20 now. And I just turned 20 in March. I can't even begin to imagine how similar yet how different our lives are. I'm gonna include more in this video on how strong Sam has been throughout all of this.
I've struggled a lot. Growing up without a mom sucks, especially when you don't know where she is.
Even though many people want to be in relationships forever with that fairy tale ending, sometimes couples are just better as friends, and that's what happened with Bill and Nancy. In 2007, they split up amicably and settled custody disputes outside of the courts to limit any kind of family trauma, and overall, they just worked better as friends. They were both great parents to their two daughters, and Nancy would have done anything for her girls, which makes the disappearance even more out of character.
And co-parenting seemed to be working well. Nancy had the girls during the week. Bill had them on weekends.
Their main concern was taking care of the kids, keeping the kids' lives as normal and as happy as can be given the circumstances.
Nancy was last seen on Friday, March 6th of 2009. The calendar taken from Nancy's office at her place of work had an imprint, a writing imprint, that she had put something down in for that Friday, but it was either erased because either the meeting was canceled or honestly, people don't know what it was, whether it was a date or whether it was just something that she wanted to do by herself. She dropped off a coworker after work at 5:15 at their house before going food shopping for herself. She went to a Thriftway market, bought a bottle of wine, a TV dinner, and a few other miscellaneous things before checking out and paying with a check at 6:15 p.m.
It was around 6 p.m. on that Friday. There was a Tenino police officer that I interviewed that was running radar right there at the corner where her house was, and he saw her pull up, and she was alone, and he saw her get the bags out and take him into the house.
The girls were away at Bill's for the weekend, so there wasn't anybody in the house, but a neighbor remembers hearing a female voice around 9:30 o'clock at night saying, "Hurry up, let's get going."
Nancy's neighbor assumed she was talking to her kids and didn't think much about it, until 2 days later, when she was reported missing. So it was a normal Sunday night. Bill Moyer was dropping the kids off at his estranged wife's house. But when he gets to the house, he notices something off.
The front door was cracked open. And so when Bill entered the home, the first thing that he noticed was the TV was still on, the living room lights were on, and the lamp beside Nancy's bedroom was still lit. On top of that, there was a half-consumed wine glass on the coffee table with another glass next to it. So this is also a point of speculation because the photos of the house have not been released to the public, and there is question of whether or not the second glass was actually a conventional wine glass, which would indicate that Nancy had company over or was expecting company, or if it was a glass coffee mug. They would be very different. Both of those outline different stories, so unless those photos are released, I guess we really won't know. There was also another wine glass in Nancy's bedroom. In the kitchen, Bill found her ID, her wallet, her car keys, even her cigarettes, which were still there. A lot of her clothes and her toiletries were still there as well. So to all accounts, it looked like she didn't go missing, that she didn't leave the home, because normally you wouldn't leave without those things. Her car was even still parked in the driveway, as I mentioned, so it's not like she went anywhere. She couldn't, unless she got a ride from somebody else.
It was going to be either just a short, brief conversation that she had intended to just speak briefly to, or and it turned into something violent inside the car, and she was taken from there, or it happened violently outside of the car because she wouldn't take her purse, and she didn't take her purse. She wouldn't have left out the door open, the purse there, the TV on, and everything, and just go off with someone and leave those things undone like that.
After seeing all this still left in the house, Bill went to go file a missing persons report on the night of March 8th. But what was interesting was the police department came back to him and said that he had to wait a mandatory of 48 hours before he could process the paperwork.
We weren't allowed to report her as a missing person because we wanted to get somebody on it fast. You know, we'd always heard that first 24 to 48 hours is a key time period. Here we're being told, sorry guys, you're out of luck. And that left honestly a pretty bad taste in our mouth. So, you know, and then once the investigation started, it was turned over to Thurston County Sheriff's. Almost the first words that a detective out of his mouth was, he goes, well, this is terrible. He goes, this is obviously not a case of somebody walking off. And that was not what we wanted to hear from the detective at the first meeting.
Now, I think this is just absolutely backwards. And to be fair, the rule has since been repealed and is no longer a process that the police department follows. But it is because of something like that that hinders so many investigations. You know, people talk about all the time that the first 48 hours are the most crucial, and in some sense that's true, but I would even argue it's sooner than that. The moment you have somebody that goes missing, that time span just continues, and the circle of where they could possibly be found just expands and it widens because you can get from point A to point B in a longer time as time goes on. So by having to wait 48 hours before the actual manpower came to start looking for Nancy, those things, I guess we don't know yet what we don't know because a lot of the information still isn't out there yet, but 48 hours is such a long time, especially when someone's life is on the line and when they don't normally go missing like this and under these kind of circumstances. At some point, they did do an extensive search of the home. They did a lot of fingerprinting and DNA analysis of the things that they found there. And on the wine glasses, the only prints that came up were Nancy's. From day one, the media has tried to paint her as someone who isn't as innocent as she may seem. They point to the fact that investigators found a bag of adult toys in her home, that since she was a newly single woman, she was going out on dates often, and that she had some tattoos that were kind of interesting and might not be to everybody's taste. But for those reasons, the media was saying that, you know what, this looks like a situation where a mom just wanted to go be free of her kids and leave. That couldn't be further from the truth. They even went as far to question her mental sanity to see if she was suicidal, and a lot of that has proved that there is no history of Nancy Moyers that would indicate any kind of behavior like that. And in many cases where there's not a lot of evidence against a single person or a party, the case went cold. It took a few years before some new leads were starting to dig up and new theories were coming out. And one of those theories was mainly the Bernard Howell theory. Bernard Howell has a really interesting story. I mean, he was a door-to-door meat salesman that has been proven that Nancy has purchased from him in the past. Some of the red meat that they found in her freezer was actually from him and his company. So they've definitely interacted before, and it's unfortunate that this man has brutally killed an elderly woman in the Washington state area, but there hasn't been enough information to actually connect him to the case, and for that reason I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it in this video because it has been debunked that he is not a suspect in the case. So even though Howell is not a suspect, it is crazy stories like that that have given the media room to kind of give theories, have people start to talk about it, and get some attention onto the case. There have since been some documentaries done online, even one from ID Discovery, and there's even a new podcast out called Hide and Seek Podcast, which dedicates all of its time solely to the Nancy Moyer case. And now they're being credited a lot with bringing this back up into the public eye and getting some new information that people haven't seen before. It is because of true crime projects like the Hide and Seek podcast that make me feel really proud to be a part of this community, because it's not just about sharing the stories and educating people. A lot of the times it's advocacy. It's helping to get information out about a case that people might not really know or understand, and hopefully lead to a case being solved, which I hope we're going to see in the next few hours with this case. Okay guys, it is 6:30 Eastern Standard Time, so it's been a few hours since the press conference came out at 2 o'clock my time, and the suspect was just seen appearing in court for the charges. So a few of the updates, I just want to give them. They're not necessarily in chronological order in which they were given to the public, because two events have come out now and a lot of the information is intertwined. So to begin with, in the first press conference, the County Sheriff's Office has said that they're not considering this man a suspect, and they wouldn't even name him at first. And it wasn't until a lot of citizen detectives took online and said, hey, we have this information and everything that you guys are saying matches this man, Eric Lee Roberts. Can we have a comment? And again, it wasn't until 6 p.m. my time that he was actually appeared in court. So we know who this man is, we know who the suspect is, regardless if the police department is going to call him that. It was his house, and he's the one that owns the property.
What you're looking at here in this search is you see a lot of holes and a lot of blue tarps. Again, this is a small piece of property just outside of Tenino, and police have been digging. This is about 6 acres just outside of the city in the small community.
He actually worked for some time with Nancy at the Department of Ecology, so they were co-workers, and they were actually living a few homes away from each other.
I didn't realize that, that they had been co-workers at some point in time. It's 5-acre parcels or larger out there, and people tend to move to the country to have a little bit of privacy, and we knew many of the other neighbors, but other than perhaps waving to him at the mailbox as you drove by, I did not know him.
It was on this past Tuesday that Eric had called 911 and eventually said that he wanted to confess to a murder. And when dispatch asked him which one, he said the Nancy Moyer case from 10 years ago, and that he was tired of hiding everything in. So then detectives went over to his house, sat with him in a squad car where he essentially confessed to killing Nancy. He claims that they were having rough sex and it turned south when she was asphyxiated by a scarf. And that's what he's claiming so far. We still don't know if any of this is true, because as of right now, there is no body and there is no evidence. So right now, it's just his word against nothing, nothing that we have right now. And for that reason, a lot of people are still skeptical and don't know how to take this. And on top of that, he has since recanted his confession, saying that he did not kill her and that he should not have come forward in the first place. So his bail is set at $1.5 million, which is a lot of money, and it should be, because this case needs to be solved. If this guy truly is dangerous and is the killer that they've been looking for 10 years, then absolutely the bail should be set at an extremely high number, because again, this case is so complicated and we still don't have all of the answers. Something that is also worth mentioning, at the original press conference, the sheriff had mentioned that items were taken from his home and they were going to be shipped out to a Seattle crime lab. The question becomes, what were those items? If this is 10 years later, you know, the idea of, let's go back to the wine glasses, right? Because this is something that was shown up in the case a few times before. Say they had wine before they did anything in the bedroom. Those wine glasses have long been washed. Her DNA wouldn't be found there. And even if you did a full top to bottom sweep of that house, I can't imagine that some evidence of her would be there after 10 years. But that's not to say that maybe he doesn't have items of her clothing or personal artifacts that she would have had on her. You know, even if she left her wallet and things at home, maybe she had on jewelry that was left in the house and that he kept. Or again, the idea that she was potentially asphyxiated with a scarf. Maybe that scarf still exists and there could be hair, there could be DNA on that. I just don't know that, like, in the actual home, say, like, on the couch, her DNA would be found. I don't know if that's how DNA works, especially 10 years later. So the idea that there were items that were shipped out to be looked at further, I think it would be something a little bit more telling and potentially items that she would have had on her at the time. The digging up of Robert's backyard is kind of indicative to part of his confession that the news media is kind of pushing out, that he had mentioned something about a fire pit. Now, I don't know if this means exactly that he would have tried to burn her body to either burn away DNA, burn away evidence, I'm not sure. Based on the photos, it doesn't look like there was a fire pit, but again, this was 10 years ago, so I'm not sure. They could be looking for, like, trace evidence in that sense, or just digging up because, I mean, it truly could be that he buried her on the property. At the time of filming this video, they have not found anything in terms of Nancy's skeletal remains that have connected her to the location. So we're still looking for some of that information. I believe it's going to be coming out within the next few days. I can't imagine that they would put off searching any longer. I'm sure this is like a 24/7 thing for them, and especially with something that's going to be catching a lot of national attention, I believe they're going to be working pretty tirelessly. So I hope we find something in the next coming days.
I guess I would say the family is cautiously optimistic. You know, we want to believe this is the end, but I think, much like the press, until there's a body, we're not there yet.